Let's look at the first scenario here. Here I have two numbers that add up to 55. I don't know either of the numbers. All I know is that they are consecutive integers. So let me just make up a couple examples of consecutive integers, 2 and 3. And don't forget, whatever you pick for your first number, so like let's say I pick 100, the next integer that follows would be 101. If I were to pick a number like 96, the next integer would be 97. How do I know that? Because integers are like your counting numbers and opposites. Whatever I pick for my first number, it's the next number after that. That's a counting number. So all I do is add 1 to the number I pick, and that'll give me my next integer. And that's how I came up with the x for my first one, because I don't know the value of either one. So I called it x. And I know the next one has to be one more than the previous. If you look at these three examples, right, the second number in each case was one more than the previous. No matter what numbers you pick, that's the relationship between the two. The second number is always going to be one more than the previous. Now let's look at the second scenario, consecutive even integers. I'm going to show you some examples here. 2, if I were to pick that one, the next one that follows would be 4. If I were to pick an even integer, it would be something like, let's say, 8. The next one after that, the next even integer would be 10. Or if I picked 206, the next integer that follows is 208. And if you notice, the second number in each case is always 2 more than the previous number. And that's how I know that the consecutive even numbers have the pattern such that if the first number is represented by x, the second number has to be 2 more than that previous one. And that's how I come up with x plus 2. And then in the last scenario, consecutive odd integers, you have to pick an odd number to start with. So let's say I pick the number 11. What's the next odd number after 11? 13. Or if I were to pick a number like 101, what's the next odd number after that? 103. And if you notice, the pattern in this one is always going to follow the same pattern as consecutive evens, such that whatever you pick for your first odd number, the next odd number is always going to be 2 more than the previous number. And that's how I came up with the pattern of x for my first unknown number and x plus 2 for the second unknown number, because the second number is always going to be 2 more than the first number. Let's look at the same situation but with 3 numbers instead of 2. If I were to pick 3 numbers just to make them up that are consecutive integers, I could use something like 2, 3, and 4. Or, just to make up another example, 106, 107, 108. All you have to do is look at the relationship between each of these numbers. So for example, I'm trying to find 3 numbers that add up to 55. All I know is they're consecutive integers. So what I'm going to do is call the first one x because I don't know what it is. Then I'll put plus. My second number, if I look at my examples, I ask myself, how much more is this number here compared to the first number? How much more is this one here compared to the first number? In either case, doesn't matter which numbers you're looking at, the second number is always going to be 1 more than the first one. So then I would put down x plus 1 because it's 1 more than the first. And then looking at the last one, I ask myself, how much more is this third number compared to the first number? Same thing in the second situation. How much more is this number compared to this number? And you can see it doesn't matter which numbers you pick. The third number is always going to be 2 more than the first number. Which means I would put down x plus 2 because it's 2 more than that first number that I picked. And I'll put equals 55. So that'll be my setup for that situation there. Now let's apply that same idea to the other 2 examples. So consecutive evens, I'm going to make up some numbers below. So a consecutive evens would be something like 2, 4, 6, or 108 and 110 and 112. Again, these are consecutive evens, 3 of them. And if I were to come up with an equation, my first number I could call x because I don't know what it is. And now to get the second one, I just ask myself, how does the second number compare to the first? Well, if I look at the second number, I can see that the 4 is 2 more than 2. And if I look at this one over here, 110, that's 2 more than 108. So I do know that the second number is always going to be 2 more than the previous one. And then lastly, the third number, you just ask yourself, how much more is 6 compared to 2 in this case? It's 4 more. Or how much is 112 compared to 108? It's 4 more as well. So again, it doesn't matter which 3 consecutive evens you pick, the third number will always be 4 more than the first, which means I'm going to put down x plus 4 for my third number there. And then I just put equals 55, and all I'll do is just solve for x to figure out what those 3 numbers are. And then lastly, I can make up an example for consecutive odd numbers. So for example, I could use 1, 3, 5, or I can use 21, 23, 25. And since we're trying to find 3 numbers that are consecutive odds, I would pick x for my first one because I don't know what it is. And now to get the second one, I would just say, okay, how much more is the second one compared to the first? And I can see that this 3 here is 2 more than 1. Or 23 is 2 more than 21. Which means I would put x plus 2 because the second number is going to be 2 more than the first. And then lastly, the third number, I look at it, I say, okay, 5, how much more is that compared to the first number? That's 4 more. Or 25, how much more is that compared to 21? It's 4 more. Which means my third number would be x plus 4. And then I just put equals 55, and then that's ready to solve for the 3 odd numbers, or the 3 consecutive odd numbers that add up to 55. And that's the basic idea on how to set up these problems when you have to find either 2 or 3 consecutive evens or consecutive odd integers, or any integers that add up to a certain amount of numbers. You can still apply this idea to 4 numbers, 5 numbers, 6 numbers, doesn't matter. It's the same idea. You just got to look at the relationships between each of the numbers that you're trying to find.